Tales of Pain, Blue Blood, Broken Bodies, the Habsburg Cost. Imagine waking into a world that calls your blood sacred, then discovering that same blood is slowly undoing you. Your mother is also your cousin, your father, your uncle, the family tree curling back on itself like a serpent. You weren't born out of love. You were bred for lineage, power, and property. And you live with the bill. This isn't Gothic fiction. For generations of royal women, it was life. Welcome to Tales of Pain, where we uncover the human cost behind history's glitter. If hidden truths and difficult legacies speak to you, tap like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from, because these echoes crossed borders long before we did. The logic of a trap. For centuries, Europe's royal houses guarded their blue blood. To keep crowns and territories inside the family, they married inside the family, cousin to cousin, uncle to niece, sometimes closer. By the 1500s, the great dynasties formed one sprawling lattice of shared ancestors. They didn't know the language we use today, recessive traits, inbreeding depression, but they lived its consequences. When close relatives have children, the odds of harmful recessive genes pairing up climb. Do it for generations, and weakness compounds. Bodies falter, minds suffer. Lineages bend toward infertility and disease. No house shows this better than the Habsburgs, their power stretching from Vienna to Madrid. Juana of Castile, grief as a prison. Juana of Castile, 1479 to 1555, daughter of Ferdinand and Isabella, was brilliant and multilingual, groomed for rule, then married for politics to Philip the Handsome. He was distant and unfaithful. Her devotion became the stuff of whispers. When Philip died suddenly in 1506, Juana's grief was raw, public, and terrifying to those around her. She traveled with his coffin, opening it to kiss him goodbye again and again. Was she mad, as enemies labeled her? Historians debate. Depression, trauma, perhaps a disorder unrecognized in her time, or a convenient story used by powerful men, her father and later her son, to sideline her. What's certain is the sentence. Decades of confinement in a convent. A queen turned into a rumor. In Tales of Pain, we don't ask whether she deserved pity. We ask why a system preferred a locked door to a living woman. Margaret Teresa, a bride twice kin. Margaret Teresa of Spain, 1651 to 1673, appears like a porcelain figure in Velázquez's paintings, silk and silver, the court circling around her. But behind the lace was a contract. She was betrothed as a child to Leopold I, Holy Roman Emperor, both her uncle and her first cousin through tangled Habsburg lines. Married at 15, she entered a race she could not win. Produce heirs, whatever the cost. Multiple pregnancies strained a body already carrying generations of genetic compression. She died at 21. Officially fever, historically a life shortened by demands she never chose. Anne of Austria, 23 years of silence. Anne of Austria, 1601 to 1666, married Louis XIII of France at 14 to cement peace between Habsburg Spain and Bourbon France. The court wanted sons. Anne endured miscarriages, stillbirths, and endless blame. Physicians bled her, scolded her, prescribed humiliations that solved nothing. Anxiety grew into a kind of exile. Rooms darkened, public appearances avoided. Then, after 23 years of marriage, the miracle. Louis XIV in 1638, and Philippe 2 years later. France rejoiced. Anne, however, knew the truth shared by so many royal women. The price of an heir was counted in private tears, and the scars no painter records. Chapter 5. Marie Antoinette, Myths, Bodies, and the Storm. Marie Antoinette, 1755 to 1793, is history's favorite target. Foreign queen, extravagance. The line she likely never said, let them eat cake. What matters for us is the human under the legend. Her marriage to Louis XVI began awkwardly and unconsummated for years, probably more his medical issue than hers. When pregnancies came, so did miscarriages, so did scrutiny. Courtiers swapped diagnoses like gossip. Real compassion was rare. We won't slap a modern label on her mind from the distance of centuries. But the signs of mounting anxiety as revolution closed in, long silences, sudden outbursts, then a grim composure at the end, show a woman crushed between a country's fury and a dynasty's weight. The science under the silk. Let's name it cleanly. Inbreeding depression happens when related parents pass down the same recessive variants, increasing the chance of disorders. Across the Habsburg generations, observers noticed a visible marker, the so-called Habsburg jaw, but the jaw was only the surface. Beneath it ran threads of infertility, developmental delays, seizures, immune fragility, and early death. The math gets stark with Charles II of Spain, 1661 to 1700. Genealogists calculate his inbreeding coefficient around 0.25, about what you'd expect for the child of full siblings, because his ancestors weren't just related once. They stacked the same ancestors again and again. Charles died without heirs, and with him the Spanish Habsburg line collapsed, dragging Europe into the War of the Spanish Succession. The lesson didn't land overnight, but it landed. Close-kin royal marriages began to fade. Letters, laments, and the quiet courage of women palace archives read like medical ledgers. Scoliosis, falling sickness, wasting fevers, lost infants. Between the lines, you hear the voices of princesses and queens writing to sisters and aunts, counting miscarriages, bargaining with God, wondering what sin they were paying for. They weren't paying for sin. They were paying for policy. And yet, in that furnace, many showed a stubborn dignity, studying, ruling as regents, protecting children, carving islands of kindness in courts that prized them as wombs more than as people. The price of purity. So return to that first moment. You, born into a golden cage whose bars are your ancestors' choices. The Habsburg story is not a carnival of oddities. It is a record of policy made on bodies, especially women's bodies, until the ledger came due. The takeaway from Tales of Pain is not that bloodlines doom us. It's that systems do. When power outranks compassion, when image outranks life, when the map matters more than the people who bleed to draw it, honor them by remembering, a dynasty is not worth a daughter. If this episode moved you, share it with someone who only knows the portraits and not the price. Drop a comment with the chapter you found most striking and what story we should uncover next. This was Tales of Pain. Until next time, hold history to the light and count every cost.